my dad's brother, half brother, is my uncle actually was an alternate in the Atlanta Olympics for whitewater K1. So he was a very accomplished kayaker and was lived in Knoxville. And so I bet I was 10 years old, and he came up to visit and said, "Well, why don't we go? I have to train." I mean, I think he would train every day, basically. And so I have to go do my workout. Why don't you, Ben, will you just come with me? And so we went, I think it's called Kanawha Falls, is in south of Fayetteville, West Virginia, like New River Gorge area. And I got in this boat and with the skirt and the paddle and everything. And basically it was just like, this is go for it. And so we went down like this class 3 rapid or something, and I flipped over and swam and all of this stuff. And I remember watching him. He was probably 30s and thinking like, this is really unique. This guy's like, he's like my dad's age, and he's like really serious about this athletics. I never thought about that before. And he was really fit and took it really seriously. And I remember that. I was probably 8 or 9 or 10 or something like that, and thinking like, oh, maybe there's a way. Maybe sport doesn't stop at age 18. And I remember being really scared like this. Kayaking is I think it levels out with the rest of outdoor sports once you've kind of figured it out. But the barrier to entry is pretty steep. I mean, you got to get in there and flip over, and you got to learn how to roll and all this stuff. So I remember like having a lot of respect for the river and thinking like, oh man, that's pretty. Not only does it require all this fitness, but it's kind of scary. But
did you like that it was scary?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I remember thinking like, oh, this is maybe some connection to like the natural world. Like, you have to have kind of respect for this, the river, basically, or really you could die. Sort of the same, I guess, why people, are drawn towards mountaineering. I mean, you kind of have to, you have to have respect, for the mountains, and it's not something that you can, if you get too ambitious or you don't manage risk, it's going to bite you. And I was definitely attracted to that. Same in climbing.
And at that point, after this first experience, had you gotten the bug, or did it take a while for it to get its hooks in you?
Well, so from there, I pursued wrestling.
Natural transition, kayaking to wrestling.
Oh man, there's a dime a dozen out there. So I wrestled through middle school and high school. Wrestling was a big in Southwest Virginia, and so it was like, in retrospect, it was almost like unhealthy dedication that the wrestlers get to the sport. I mean, it's like, wrestling would be like 90% of life, and school would be like 10. I mean, it's like religious almost, and the weight cutting. And so I was like really, really invested in wrestling. And then I remember a return when I got my driver's license. I returned to kayaking because I kind of knew how to do it, and it's pretty popular there in Southwest Virginia. Virginia Tech is there, and I would say, of the top at the time 25 kayakers in the U.S. Like maybe 30-40% of them would get undergrads at Virginia Tech because of the access to whitewater is so good there. So I got back into it, and it was like the complete opposite of structured high school wrestling. It was like the antithesis of it, and that was really, really enjoyable. So I ended up going to UT Chattanooga because the Olympic Training Center was there at the Ocoee. UTC, if not Virginia Tech, UT Chattanooga is sort of and UT Knoxville are sort of like the kayak. Like if you wanted to maximize your time kayaking, that's where you'd want to go.
We got to go back to wrestling. So your dad's what kind of professor was your father, and what did your mom do?
My dad's a horticulture professor, so he teaches. I mean, he's been through it all now, between forestry, and I mean, really grass well-being, and like turf and
Oh,
um,
amazing.
yeah, he's a horticulturist. He's
Yeah,
a
that's great.
PhD in horticulture, and yeah, I have a ton of respect for it now. I mean, I think it's really cool, and he's sort of a master of a really niche topic. But at 18, I thought like, what? This is like,
Well,
how
yeah,
much could you know about grass?
George Tomo was a hero of mine. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but one of the
Hmm.
most
Yeah,
legendary
cool.
groundskeepers in
Hmm.
professional sport. I had my own lawn service with my buddy Nick Crump growing up, the yard barber. Anyone in Kansas City probably remembers our empire. Um, but that's amazing. So your dad's a turf expert, and you become this wrestling machine. So I feel like there's usually something going on where a parent or an uncle or something is like, let's get this 6-year-old out on the mats and turn him into a gladiator. How did it work for you?
Well, so I was not a very disciplined um, or academic kid at this age. I got terrible grades, and I was kind of wild. Um, I had been diagnosed with like ADHD and whatnot, and wrestling seemed to, I don't want to put words in my parents' mouth, but it was so hard, and it was just like so exhausting. And there was practice before school and after school, and the coaches were sort of like assholes, sort of in a loving way. I mean, it was a no nonsense activity. They didn't tolerate um, anything really. I mean, the guys are really in line, and you don't have time really to get in trouble. And you had to have like a C average. And so I speculate that when I showed interest in it, my parents were probably like, hey, this is going to keep him sort of focused and on track. So more the merrier. The alternative
How
would have,
old?
I was probably like sixth grade, but then it went to 12th grade. It went all the way through my senior year.
Right.
And I wasn't, if I was like 10% better, or I really wanted to like walk on or something, I probably could have done it in college, but I wasn't really good enough. I mean, some of these guys, man, to start in, at 3 or 4 years old, and they go all 12 months a year, and they go to camps, and they pursue these coaches. I mean, it's incredible how serious some people, people take wrestling, and I didn't. So anyway, yeah, they were like, you can wrestle all you want because it seems like it's kind of keeping you um, structured.
So we're going to come back to this question I'm about to ask later in this conversation. Something I'm wondering about this experience with wrestling. So you're in sixth grade. I would like to hear how you actually got into it. Maybe there was some older kid that inspired you or whatever, but you get out there on the mat. I have to imagine it's a pretty uncomfortable experience. And I'm curious at the outset, to manage that feeling of discomfort, did you go inside or did you go outside? Did you dissociate or did you go into the feeling of, wow, this is uncomfortable? And did you get present with it?
Yeah, that's a great observation about wrestling, because I think it's it stays with you for life. I think to have that level of defeat at that age is a really valuable skill set. And when I was in the Navy, and after that, I think it really paid dividends. I mean, it can be humiliating, and you're not able to sort of spread the loss with with the soccer team or the football team and say, oh, well, the defense really dropped the ball, but we did all right. And I mean, it's just you and the other guy, and I would go. I would go pretty internal. I mean, I think my confidence at that time wasn't great. I was sort of aware, like, okay, these guys are former national runner-ups, and then I would lose and think. I mean, I had some pretty good perspective on terms of like, well, you can't really be that um, good. And a lot of guys, it takes a while. I mean, they're not, from a developmental standpoint, a senior in high school can be night and day from a freshman. And so you have this really wide range of physical maturity, and to your advantage or disadvantage. But it's a hard pill to swallow. I mean, you got to be out there. The whole school's there. I remember, girls would come that I had a crush on, and you just get your ass kicked and think like, oh my God, this is humiliating. And, or whatever the case, your parents would drive a couple hours to see you, you know, across the state, and you'd get pinned in 2 minutes. It's like, this is awful. And a lot, another thing I think that I really took away with that is it had a lot of turn and a lot of quitting. A lot of guys quit. A lot of people wrestled for like a couple months and thought, oh, this isn't for me. And so when I made it to the end, when I made it to the end of my senior year and stuck with it, and I was pretty, I was winning, it sort of taught me like perseverance and not giving up can pay off in the long run, which obviously is like probably the only thing you need to know going into buds is like, the person who has the ability to see the process in like the 10-year period is the winner, and the guy who's like can't see past Wednesday, or like 2 hours from now is in big trouble. So yeah, I mean, I would credit a lot of I would credit, I mean, a lot of who I am from wrestling on, which is something that it's interesting you asked about that, because I haven't thought about that in years.
And when you were in the service, what did you hope to get out of your time in at the outset?
I hope to, well, there was sort of the present conscious answer to that question, and then there was sort of the subconscious, which I'm admitting to now as time goes on. At the time, I was frustrated, and I was sort of over being like a loser. I thought I can't graduate from undergrad in 4 years, and I can't really get good grades, and I've sort of not been successful at anything but sports, really. Anything that my parents want me to succeed at, and the military was like a fresh start. I thought it would be like I could clean the slate, and I could redefine myself as a success. And certainly, if I could go through, if I could become a SEAL, it would be like undeniable that I was incapable of success in a hard, something that's kind of internationally recognized as hard. And looking back, I think that's once buds ended and on to deployments and stuff, I think it sort of was like I wanted to affirm that I could do, I had what it takes. I think that I was, I don't want to get too deep on you. I think a lot of young men see the military as a way to find out if they are brave, if they are competent, if they're strong, if they can handle combat. And yeah, I think now looking back, like all those things were true for me. I mean, I didn't, it was sort of like an identity pursuit. And then also, I was trying to look at sort of like what my peers in this southern sort of Greek life infested undergraduate world, like what were they planning on sort of doing? What are you like? What contribution are we going to make to the world that's not like, I don't know, things that people that go to the University of Tennessee and are 20 years old plan to do? And I struggled with that question a lot. Like, what is the world telling me to do? Like, get a job and banking or finance or insurance or whatever. And I was like, that can't be it. That can't be what the story. And being a SEAL definitely would be the story. Like, oh, well, at least even if I do it for 5 years, it's like, oh, at least I did, at least I shot for the stars and like tried to contribute something to something. And so that was a lot of it for me. Like I can't just go on and be um, I don't know, in business or whatever yet. Maybe I will arrive there and later in life, but I got to try something hard. And at the time, SEALs were like getting a lot of basically like the war in Afghanistan, Iraq were like becoming stale in the American public eye. They were like, what we got to get, what are we doing? We're on year, this would be like 2009. We're on year 6. Like, is this going to end? And sort of one of the going ideas and was getting a lot of momentum was like, well, what we'll do instead of, um, you know, instead of keeping this trend of mass casualties and these major losses of and IED deaths was like this precision. We're gonna, chop the snake's head off with these like night warriors of the darkness. And I was like, man, that's really interesting. That's really cool because my previous idea of like joining the military was like what I like. Oh man, I'll just be in the ranks and in this truck and maybe get blown up and do what my superior tells me. And then I was like, oh, maybe there's this sort of more complex sort of surgical way to go about it. And then I was like, oh, that sounds a lot more interesting.
When you experienced war, how did the reality of it map to your notion of what it might be like?
It was underwhelming. It was something that I sought very, very passionately. It was something I really, really cared about. When I finally got into the teams, I had missed sort of this Afghan. I was sort of like 10 minutes late to a generation that had really been employed heavily for 7-8 years and had suffered a lot of loss and had really um, been effective in the war on terror. And my generation was sort of like we were just like a minute late. Is sort of how I felt. And so um, it wasn't really guaranteed like, oh, we're going to go and um, just do mission after mission after mission after mission. And like things sort of got complex and different strategies. And hey, we want to power more local forces to sort of become autonomous and all of this. And so, um, yeah, I was like, man, this is, um, I want to play in the game. I'm just like, I've been practicing forever and I want to play in the game. And then luckily, or maybe I guess I shouldn't say luckily, but some opportunities occurred and some combat was seen, and it was just, yeah, it was underwhelming. I mean, I think I placed it on this pedestal of sort of this badge of this, this thing that I had to do to be like a legitimate SEAL or like to be, I'll be in the club after that, and then nothing, nothing really. And it's a really combat is a really um, it's something that I think the mind is going to like sort of inspect for a long time. A lot of decisions are made in like 2 or 3 seconds and then sort of thought about for 10 years. Um, and so it's a heavy experience, and I think a lot of people there's been a lot of pain in that process of sort of, I should have done this and I should have done that. And so I try to sort of now, talking to guys, I try to sort of diffuse um, that sentiment. Like all of service is like war, like combat, and like, or were you part of it? And these people don't know what they're talking about, and these people do because they did this and this guy did that, and it's just, yeah, I don't think that's productive really, and it causes a lot of people a lot of, um, pain and whatever.
And Ben, I want to talk about what you're doing with VOAG and what VOAG is doing to help people synthesize those feelings and experiences and how you've synthesized it. Before we do that, though, you had this notion of who you would become if you did these things when you entered the service. When you were actually doing it, what did you think about that idea you had at the outset that you were going to transform and become this other type of human being once you've done these certain activities and achieved them? Did you feel like, okay, I've done it, now I've transformed? Or did you feel like I'm this same person and I'm in a different context?
Um, the latter. I felt like I'm the same person, and it's not for nothing. I think one of the benefits of being in a unit like that is that the targets and the mission sets that the SEAL teams and adjacent similar units are worried about are usually, pretty up to no good, for lack of a better term. So, there is that sense of like, um, you can connect the dots in sort of, purpose, and hey, this is quite obviously, a situation that needs to be addressed, and we addressed it, and there's obviously, a point of pride that comes with that. But for me personally, it was a little bit like, now what? And sort of, it ended up developing into like one more horizon line, and once I get there, I will, be satisfied, and then, I just need to focus on getting there, and then from there I'll see another horizon line, and I'll get there, and sort of you get in this cycle of, like, I know that satisfaction is possible, but I just, in a couple more steps I'll be there. Um, and that's something that, really didn't stop post military, and I think is, for a lot of your listeners, I've noticed that in endurance sports can sort of feel like that too. Like I'm on the cusp of, considering myself a good bike racer or a good runner, and I'm, once I get this done, I'll be able to look at myself and say like I'm a real, I'm an accomplished X, Y, or Z, and, you know, for me, I still, if I'm being honest, like I still sometimes get in that headspace of like, okay, this year I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna get this time, and then at that point I'll know like I'm fast or whatever. And that started in the SEAL teams. I think just being in like the, under the impression that you got to just get to the top of this mountain, and then you'll give yourself, you'll acknowledge yourself.
How did endurance sports fit into the mix during your time in the service? And then how did it continue to be a part of your life afterwards? So, you were on the mats from a young age. You had your kayaking phase. You're in the teams. And then what's going on with endurance sports while you're in? And then what happens on the other side?
Yeah. So when I was in undergrad, I dislocated my shoulders. I broke my humerus head kayaking, and,
Whoa, how did that happen?
oh,
Rock?
yeah, I flipped over, and when I was like going over, I saw the rock that I was going to hit, and then so I flipped over and I realized, oh, I'm definitely going to hit my face on this rock. And so what I did was like this sort of cover your face with your elbow and shoulder sort of, and then the way the rock hit my shoulder, it broke my humerus head. So anyway, I had a shoulder repair, and that this is about the time I started getting curious about the military. And when I was recovering and I was seeing the orthopedist like every, I don't know, however many weeks, finally he said, don't do anything with your arms, but if you want to run or hike or ride a stationary bike, do that. That's fine. You can exercise and do that. And so I started running a ton, and then it went up from, I started just doing longer distances. And then I realized to like get accepted into the Navy, I had to get in like really good shape. And I was like, oh, I already like running. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it all kind of worked. It all kind of blended together. And so I did a couple half Ironmans and whatnot in that year that I was waiting to go to the Navy. And I thought that, it was
That's casual.
yeah, I was into it. I thought it was cool, and I thought it was like two birds with one stone, because I was like, if I don't want to race, I just have to do this on my own to get prepared to join the Navy. Um, and so then, so for maybe the first 5 years, it was nothing. I didn't do any sort of distance endurance or anything like that. And then after a couple deployments, I started like really craving anything that was like the opposite of the beach and like SEAL life. So I mean, I started going taking trips on the weekends and mountain biking and in Pisgah and
Oh,
casually.
nice.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome. I had some friends, that were big mountain bikers and still are, and then that sort of escalated, and I climbed Mount Rainier with my wife, with a guide, and I remember thinking like, this is awesome. I mean, these guys are like the SEALs of the mountains. And I remember thinking like, I could never again hire a guide. Like, I have to learn this skill set myself. And so I was still in the Navy, and I was taking trips out here to Denver. We did like Longs Peak in winter and totally got our asses kicked. I mean, we could have been killed. We had no, I mean,
you gotta please say more. Like, tell me, you can't just, you mentioned earlier, like I could go deep, but I'm not good. Ben, this is the
okay, sure.
Deep.
So,
all right. So
yes.
Tell me about almost getting killed on Longs Peak.
Okay. So I'm like, I do this trip to Rainier with my wife. It's our honeymoon, and we get these guides and it was amazing. It was so fun. And like I said, I determined that I have to learn how to do this on my own. And so I sort of gravitate to these other guys in the SEAL teams who knew a little bit about mountaineering. We have, you could kind of pursue it if you wanted to, or sometimes people get tasked with like these Denali trips, or they go over to the Nordic, Iceland, Greenland, and do some sort of winter training. And so some of these guys are pretty savvy on mountain warfare in the winter. So I like sort of aligned myself with them, and they were into it, and we rock climbed around the Southeast a bunch of times. And then one trip, I think we were in Nevada, and they said, "Oh, we're going to go to the Ouray Ice Festival in Ouray." Familiar with that, where they let the water go over the cliffs and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we got tickets, and we're going to go to this thing, and I'm super excited. I've never ice climbed before. I don't even think I've ever had crampons on. But I'm like psyched on alpinism. I'm like reading all Steve House's books and stuff like this. And so we're going to go. Now that I'm thinking back on this story, is like insanely irresponsible. So we're going to go, and we find out that the park's not going to open in time because it's not cold enough, and it sort of opens when it opens. They don't say like, oh, it's going to open at this certain date. So we start I think we had flights to Denver for some reason, and we start thinking about what else could we do sort of similar, since we already have this flight plan and everyone's excited. And so my one buddy um, has done the Keyhole route on Longs Peak, which is like the summer hiking route before. And he's like, there's this better route. It's called the Keener's route. It's on the diamond. It's not really on the diamond. It's
Better.
sort of. Are you
It's a
familiar with
better
this?
route. No, but I'm just
Oh
imagining where this is
man,
going.
this is like,
Yeah.
oh, it's just Longs Peak as a whole is a has dished out some ass whoopings. And so anyway, we decide like, okay, let's do it. I mean, we're like 25 years old and full of like ego and like whatever, how bad could it be? So we go up there and set out. It was the winter solstice. I think it was like December 9th or something like that. First week of December is like some of the shortest days of the year. And so we go up there, and our mission is like just to go in one day, which isn't very uncommon, but we're gonna go and climb. And so we have all the ice axes and everything, and we set out. And honestly, the climbing went pretty well. I mean, it wasn't too difficult, but the day just got really. We just ran out of time, and we get up to the summit, and it's sort of dark, and you've got to find this rappel station to get down. And the guys who had been there before were like, "Yeah, well, we've done it before. Like when we get up there, we'll find it." And you can't really just wander off the summit. I mean, there's like a couple 1,000-foot drops on some sides and whatever. And so it's getting dark, and we're not finding the rappel bolts, and we're sort of under the impression that we will in like 10 more minutes, but we searched and searched until probably 1 or 2 a.m., probably 5 or 6 hours. It's the middle of the night. I can't imagine how cold it is up there. It's like, I don't know, 0. No sleeping bags, no tent, nothing. Water bottles are frozen. And yeah, we just decide that we're screwed. And we have to wait till morning. So we took the ropes and basically like made carpets out of them. You just coil it back and forth like this, and cuddled until the sun came up. And then we found the bolts, and we went down, and all our buddies and I guess my wife was probably, yeah, my wife at the time was like about to call the ranger system. She was in tears. And months later, well, the next day, my buddy, one of the guys was like, "Man, my feet aren't warming back up, and I don't feel them." And we sort of blew it off. And months later, he had some of his toes, not the actual toe, but like the pads, all the pads of them, had them removed
Oh man,
from frostbite.
brutal.
Yeah, and it was really serious. I mean, it was like at the time, it was kind of like whatever. But then as I've moved here, and I've gotten more and more knowledgeable, like that's really stupid. I mean, to think that you know, just winter mountaineering is fine. It is what it is. People do it all year here, but it's not something to take lightly. And you could have gotten
Yeah,
killed. I mean, how would we have? I mean, it's your just luck that it was 0 that night and not negative 35. And at that point,
right.
or whatever, you had to call a helicopter, and then now you're putting the air crew in danger, and I mean, all kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a really heavy situation. Yet I think
Yeah,
we can probably make some jokes about it. So when
yeah.
you were up there and you're like, okay, we have to spend the night. Number one, I have to imagine whoever said they knew where the rappel point was. I bet that person got a little bit of shit during the course of the night. And I'm wondering, did you have a conversation about who you would eat first?
Okay, when we found the rings, there was a lot of sympathy or a lot of grace given, because they are not easy to find at all, and they're sort of
Okay.
can be snowy,
All right.
and B,
Fair enough. Fair enough.
No, I mean, we never really, I don't really remember admitting defeat really
Right.
until like a week later, like, and then some other people were
Yeah.
sort of like, what the, what were you guys thinking,
Right.
Um, anyway, you know,
So from there, mountain biking probably seemed like, okay, this is probably a better
oh,
activity.
yeah, it still does.
Did you continue to mountaineer, or did you go deeper into cycling at that point?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
That, that trip really humbled me, and my sort of admiration for mountaineering grew stronger from that. I mean, I definitely took a step back and thought, like, you got to be a little bit smarter. Um, so at this time, all of our vacations from what I had to do for my military job were all, in the West. So I started doing some like, um, what's more popular now, but like, Teton, Grand Teton runs and stuff. Sort of like a blend of endurance and light mountaineering. And then, yeah, so sort of at the same time, I just started running with a crowd that was into distance endurance sports, doing 50K runs and long mountain bike rides. And there's a race in Asheville called Pinbar, which is the Pisgah Mountain Bike Adventure Race, and it's super cool. They don't basically everyone lines up at 7 a.m. You got to it's two partners. Well, one, you and your partner, and everyone's lined up, and they take this sheet off of this map basically and reveal 6 points in Pisgah National Forest and say go. And so you and your buddy have to go get the first person to come back with 4 of them wins, or you can get 5 and subtract 1 hour from your time. And it's not as easy. It's sort of like knowing the trails, or knowing like, oh, we're going to go up here and connect over here is like part of it, so it sort of plays into like a local scene. And I was doing this race every year, and I would mountain bike like 3 times in preparation, but I would never not go. And another cool thing about this race is it's sort of like cruel in that it's sometimes like 50 miles and 5,000 feet of climbing, and then the next year it'll be like 100 miles and 10,000, and there's no indicator of like, this year we're really going to kick your ass, and or not. So you never really know what you're getting into, and it's such like there's such a dynamic between you and your partner, and like not arguing. And, oh, it's so cool. So I was doing that.
Can you use a GPS when you do this? This sounds like an Alley Cat bike messenger race. I don't know if you've ever done one, but it's very similar.
No.
Like you get a list of checkpoints, you got to decide how to get there, GPS or not.
No, there's no orienteering or any sort of like
No.
finding. It's very at the intersection of Willow Creek and Fox Trail is point 1. Go there. They're not like out in the woods or anything like that, like some of these orienteering races. So it's a speed race.
Did you have to ride Squirrel Gap at all?
Yeah, all the time. Okay. All the time.
Okay. I've talked about that on a few podcasts. I did the Pisgah stage race twice. I keep talking about this, but I had someone who's a cycling photographer try to assault me in the middle of the race and kick my handlebars after I actually very generously yielded the trail to him, and then he started yelling at me, and then something kidding happened. But but I love that area. Squirrel Gap is like I found it to be a very challenging trail to ride.
Yeah.
I had a very gnarly wreck on it, but I'm just imagining mountain biking a handful of times a year and jumping onto that terrain. Mm-hmm. It's had to be pretty intense.
Yep. So this is the same production company as the stage race, Pisgah Productions.
Okay.
Same group. Same trail, same group.
Todd?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And
cool.
Okay, so I'm going to this race, but I'm still in the Navy, and I'm like, I'm so humbled. I'm like, we're like in the back 50%. So when I got out of the Navy, I knew I wanted to move to Colorado, and I my wife was pregnant. No, wait, I had had my first daughter when we moved here, and so I really pursued climbing sort of simultaneously with mountain bikes, but it wasn't really. I wasn't going to get the most bang for my buck really with the time that I could spend. I mean, one nice thing about being a dad and a cyclist is you have the mornings. It's like if you really want to commit, just get up earlier than whatever, or start at 4:45 a.m. and you can be back by 9, and with a 4-hour ride. And with climbing, it's tough, man. It's it's an all Saturday thing, and you're kind of dependent on your partner. And then also, it's let's drive 3 hours to this place and hike for an hour, and then do the climb for an hour, and then drive all the way back. And it's so anyway, I just wasn't. I you know it is what it is. But I just kind of slowly found myself gravitating towards endurance, and I became close friends with a guy named Ryan Kroll, who owns Boundless Endurance, which was part of Lifetime, but it's since sort of divested. Although they still endorse each other. Like if you get registered for the Leadville, any of the Lifetime series races, really, and it's like, do you want to coach, or we can help you train. Boundless is the the training partner of the Lifetime series. So I was riding all the time with and anyway, ended up uh, I ended up getting registered for Leadville. I think this is 3 years ago, 2020. Um, and again, like totally humbled by the disparity between where I was at and what's possible. I mean, I think that's been sort of a theme in my life, is like, um, trying to identify where you are pathetic relatively, and sort of embracing that. I mean, that's one of the cool things about living here, is like, you can go to a coffee shop and get, the young lady who's pours your coffee could be like a total badass world champion. And like, it's not a place to be, um, I have a joke, like, my wife's from Nashville, and I can play the guitar like a little bit, but like I would tell her, like, don't ever tell anyone when we're in Nashville that I can play the guitar. Like, and that's sort of how mountain bikes and running is here in Golden, is like,
Sure.
is don't, don't, there's a lot of unassuming folks here that will really humble you out. So, um, yeah, by this point, once I'm sort of privy to like how fit and how, what's possible in that world, I was totally hooked, and still am. Um, and so, yeah, off I was in the endurance world.
So Ben, as you go deeper into the endurance world, what are you getting out of doing it? What is this bringing to you? I mean, there are the physical benefits, obviously everyone's familiar with, although at a certain point, you're definitely hitting the point of diminishing returns and getting on the other side of it, probably being healthy. But existentially, mentally, what were you getting out of this as a human being, as a person, and where was it taking you?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that's changed for me in the last 18 months. I at first it was sort of a continuation of what we were talking about earlier, of like this validation um, drive. Like, let me let once I get to this horizon line, or once I get this race result, or I used to be into these, like, I used to sort of daydream about these like crazy things that would be on Strava, if I'm being totally honest, like, oh, I want to do the Kokopelli
Right.
Trail in one day, and that'll just be like so epic, or
Right.
um and then I well to answer your question, I think in the military, um, even though you sort of swear at it while it's happening, structure and sort of the day's plan for tomorrow and the next day and the purpose is really becomes sort of habitual, and then once it's gone, it can be sort of make you feel lost. Like, what am I? No one's going to tell me what to do tomorrow and whatnot. And so in bike racing, you can sort of recoup that. You get your schedule and you're like, cool, this is my plan. I got my race date. I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to do all these workouts, and it feels very like it did in the SEAL teams. This is sort of the structure and the plan and whatnot. And it was like, an opportunity for personal growth. I mean, I think um, I've always sort of had an aversion to slipping in the other direction, like going up, and then, I don't want to think that my best performing days are behind me. In retrospect, I feel like a lot of that's what I was getting out of bike racing. Like, oh, I'm a little bit better than last year. I'm a little bit better than last year. But when my second daughter was born, I had a big, my wife was like 8 months pregnant, or maybe 7.5 or whatever. And she had sort of endorsed this big, like, backcountry ski trip. And it was going to be like sort of the last thing to do. And then we were going to have the baby. And then, you need to be around for a couple weeks, months.
That's what I hear. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you expecting?
No, I've got kids too. I think, yeah, you got to be around, man.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to watch my words. I don't want anybody to message me and say, like, anyway. So basically, totally. My wife, the pregnancy was going well, and I was like, oh, I want to do this thing. And it was in COVID, and the logistics of this ski trip got, like, my buddy's flights or something, or the place we were going to stay got just destroyed. And so I didn't go. Right. And then we had the baby, and then I was home. I didn't do anything for a couple months afterward. And it was really an eye-opening experience, because I found myself sort of unhappy, and just like it became obvious to me that my ego and my being was being propped up by these events, and like, I'm just a person who's skipping along from epic bike ride to mountain climb and then, like, I'm the doing, the act of accomplishment is just sustaining the interim until the next accomplishment, and the interim is painful. And it was a hard time. It was a really hard time. And it really opened my eyes to maybe we need to focus on the being. The being needs to be more enjoyable, and maybe it's the process than not the race day or the whatever. And yeah, so it wasn't, that's not something you can snap your fingers and be like absolved of that. But that's now, I try not to romanticize and sort of put on a pedestal like these epic, kick your ass days, and just think like, oh, it's the process of, it's the life spent in the sport is more than it is the accomplishment. And I think I've had to really invest in my interest in some things that are not sport and are not physical, or don't go on Strava. Which is sort of ironic that I'm thinking through this with you. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things in life that are hard, that aren't physical. Relationships are hard, and writing profound ideas, and it's hard, and tons of stuff that I never, you know, probably, coming out of the military it was just so like um, cognitive accomplishments weren't really um, favored in the way that physical ones were. And
Right.
yeah,
Ben,
that all sort
something,
of came to head, I think, when my second daughter was born. It
yeah,
sort of like, man, what am I, 12 years old? Like I'm just my whole, I'm just like skipping along from mountain bike ride to mountain bike ride.
no, that really resonates, Ben. A couple of words that I jotted down as you were talking, because what you're describing really resonates with me. There are a lot of different ways to look at sporting pursuits or physical activity. One way to look at it, and I think what a lot of people experience, is this lens of going for like bigger, longer, placing higher. And I think within all achievement, there's this tension or dichotomy between wanting to do your very best and having to have a positive mindset and being highly organized and disciplined to do that, coupled with you do have to have some level of dissatisfaction with the status quo and aspiration to do better, or you'd just be sitting on the couch eating
Mm-hmm.
potato chips or whatever, right? And similar to what you've described, something that's happened for me over time, and I think a lot of it has to do with having children, and for me personally, realizing the area where I needed to develop the most as a human was my ability to be present
Mm-hmm.
and undistractable, and to compartmentalize things that don't really matter and to focus on the things that matter the most.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened for me over time with sport, and I was never a professional athlete or anything, but it's been an important part of my life for 30 plus years. And to me, it became about what happened while I was doing it and everything disappearing and being fully present to the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it providing that organizing mechanism, because when I think about it, even if I'm doing a really brutal interval session or I'm going and doing a race, that's actually, Ben, that's the easiest part of my day.
Mm-hmm.
Everything
Totally.
else that I do is way harder, because I know if I follow, like you described, if I follow the training, if I do what my coach tells me to do, it's going to work. I'm going to
Yeah.
get faster. I'm going to be able to have a good performance if I can manage some other factors. Almost nothing else in life is like that. And I think that's why sporting activities, physical performance, and particularly endurance sports, it's really seductive. But if you get sucked too far in that direction, then it actually, I think, becomes kind of counterproductive if it just becomes about chasing status or validation. Because as you know, you've been in some of the highest consequence, highest stress environments a human can be in. And it's also the case in professional sports or any domain of life. If you just like look around a little bit and you spend some time with the people who are the very best in the world,
Mm-hmm.
which I've had the opportunity to do, and I know you have as well, you start to have a little bit of perspective on
Mm-hmm.
where you're at. And for those people, they've got other domains of their life where they're not the very best,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's all, yeah.
I think it's such an important message for, it's not saying don't do the 350-mile version at Unbound this weekend, or don't run 100 miles or whatever, but it's more of like, ask yourself, if you're going to run 100 miles, like, are you just going to want to run 200 miles? Is there, what's the reason? And is it just because it's hard? Is that really the whole reason? I was listening to Ben Delaney and yourself, and the way he talked about, the sort of feeling vulnerable with his YouTube videos and stuff, and the opportunity for people to get on and comment and just, is somebody going to rip me up, and thinking, yeah, dude, that's hard. You could ride your bike as much as you want, and you're, like you said, I mean, almost not totally, but bike racing is a sort of a bunch of inputs, and it produces an output. And as long as you know what the inputs are and you have the discipline to put them in there, within reason, there are, genetics and different body types, but you're going to get the same output. But like that's becoming what he's doing, or what a lot of people are doing in life that aren't um, ultra distance is really hard. And I'm not saying, I just think it's healthy. It's been healthy for me to recognize both and not put my whole self worth in like whatever FTPs and super long distances and stuff like that.
And Ben, if you could talk a bit about the work that you're doing with VOAG, and what are the benefits that getting outdoors, being in these environments, being in a team, what does that bring to people who have left the service, and what do you hope to achieve with this work, and what does the team hope to achieve?
Yeah, so VOAG is the Veterans Outdoor Advocacy Group is a 501c3 that is focused on expanding the optionality that veterans have in their mental health um, implementation options through the VA or otherwise. So, our focus is you're a veteran, you're um, going through whatever you have to do to, uh, you know, whatever mental health treatment you're going through at the VA, and that care provider has a more diverse list of options than they currently do today. We focus on the outdoor recreation therapy side of it, but we're not implying that that's it. So these are anything anything that would expand the different options that veteran would have and that care provider could provide. Um, we promote. So about let's see, it's been about 5 years ago. There was an idea of that the VA should fund outdoor recreation for veterans through the VA, in part of as a mental health implementation, and that gained a lot of traction. And VOAG was founded as more or less a lobbying organization to push that, to lobby for that, and we were successful in large part in that. The Compact Act, which was passed in 2020, established a task force that would further examine the efficacy of veterans in the outdoors. So that's going on now, where VOAG sits on that task force, which is going to run until the end of 24. And so, yeah, we're basically, a successful end state for us is, a young man or woman is seeing their care provider, and that person's able to say, hey, look, there's these options for you. Obviously, pharmaceuticals is probably always going to be on that list. Talk therapy, always going to be on that list. And that one day, paid for outdoor recreation therapy will be on that list. And the way it's looking now, that we're on track. So there's thousands of what we call VSOs, veteran service organizations, who actually facilitate outdoor therapy in America. So these are the folks that are actually taking veterans hunting, fishing, skiing, you name it, everything. I mean, you'd be surprised at how diverse some of these outings are. But yeah, we want to empower them and sort of break the status quo that is in place now, which is all of this, primarily is private generosity, donations, grants, and giving, basically, that funds all of this. And we are determined to see that that the VA, endorse it, and that it becomes systemic. And yeah, that's sort of the mission. And then, to answer your question, I think sort of, in line with what we've talked about today, outdoor ventures require a lot of planning and functions that are present in military operations. So you think about small teams, think about being responsible for the safety and well-being of the people that you go on the trip with. Think about risk, managing risk. Think about planning, logistics, purpose. I mean, no one really just pulls over and walks through the woods aimlessly. You always sort of have whether it's to catch fish or it's to climb a 14 or whatever. Same on a military operation. And then and then I think there's some physiological benefits as well. I mean, just the, like we talked about in the same way that, endurance has helped me, or, whatever, to train for something, to have a goal, to form a relationship with other people based on a common goal. I mean, these are all things that I think people who, are recently separated, or, I shouldn't even say that. I mean, it could be decades separated from the military, sort of, miss, and by participating in that, they can, it's cathartic, and it's helpful. We're not, of the impression that, people with different psychological, issues are going to be, this is some healing mechanism, and that they can hike their way to, to remedy each and every issue. But we do, we've seen firsthand how viable it is, and there's no reason why veterans shouldn't have access and have some support and participating in stuff like that.
And Ben, for you, being involved in this organization, helping to bring this together, move things forward on the policy side, and then the actual direct action and work with people who have served, what do you get out of it? What does it bring to you?
I would say, VOAG, being part of VOAG's probably been one of the biggest, probably the largest blessing of my entire life. I think that, not to like jumble up all the words, but like it gives me purpose to enable other veterans to find their purpose, sort of. Well, not sort of. I mean, that's it, really. So, yeah, for me, I mean, I think that we're sort of in the midst of I don't know, maybe awakening is not the right word, but I think in 5 years we'll be a lot more aware of sort of the secondary and tertiary effects that the GWAT had, and the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and sort of some of the byproducts of participating in those wars had on those veterans. And I think, to be narrow in our approach to it, and sort of maintain the status quo in these traditional approaches to helping these people is not smart. I mean, I think it's now more than ever, I think people are acknowledging that good mental health is very complex, and it's, there's not anyone who tells you like, oh, I drink 2 gallons of water a day now and I feel better, or I took this supplement or whatever. I mean, it's all, it's a massive mix up of different components, and every instance of PTSD or what have you is unique to another person. And we're sort of on a in chapter 1 or 2 of realizing that. And to be part of the response to that has been an enormous blessing. I mean, it's super enjoyable. I wish it was something that I could spend 100% of my time on.
And Ben, what's next for you with VOAG? And do you have an event on the horizon that you're training for?
I am running the Silver Rush 50 miler in 5 or 6 weeks. I went about 3 years strictly mountain bikes with just over and over again. And then coming out of last year, I was like, maybe I want to try one of these running events and see. And I'll be honest, as soon as this race is over, I'll be back on my bike. It's, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say that till the race comes. I'll tell you, running, the instantaneous, the spontaneity of just putting your shoes on and running is really enjoyable. But that's it. I think I'm ready to.
It's a little bit of wear and tear, Ben.
Yeah, there is wear and tear, and
Yeah.
I just not as like dynamically interesting. I think there's just so many ways to get better at mountain biking, from climbing to descending to all different types, where running just seems very much more like, who can set the cruise control at the right point for the longest. Anyway, yeah, so I'm going to do this run race and then go from there. And VOAG is in the midst of establishing and developing what we're calling the VOAG Coalition. So this is a group of, it's open, anyone can join that sort of meets the criteria of a veteran service organization. These are groups that are really the lifeblood of the movement, that really are invested, they're taking folks out and delivering the outdoor therapy on a daily basis. And so what we want to do is sort of aggregate their pain points, issues, problems, and leverage some of the relationships we made in DC, so that we can sort of speak for the whole, and enable them to be as effective as they can. And then also, it's obvious that once this change happens and the VA is open to financially supporting these trips, they're not just going to write checks to whoever. They're going to want some sort of accreditation and some sort of validation that they're sending the patient to quality for quality experiences. And so working, with the coalition to sort of establish what that looks like, best practices, and so that once this change happens, sort of that industry, if you will, is ready to receive, ready to go. So that's what we're focused on now.
Awesome. And all you have to do is get through this 50-miler injury-free, and then you can do the rest of it. So if people want to learn more about Ben, you want to learn more about VOAG, we'll have links in the show notes so you can go deeper. Ben, thanks so much for being here today and for sharing these stories. Really appreciate it, man.